Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to the second keynote speech of the conference. Really good to see you all back. I was told shouldn't have been virtual president, should have been hybrid president. Never mind. But I hope you had a good dinner yesterday. So I'm very pleased to announce, to present very briefly, because we're a little bit behind time. I think a lot of people, including myself, are really proud and very happy and pleased to have our distinguished academic awardee from 2020, Professor Gloria Agyemang, to be our keynote speaker this year. I could list all the publications and all the work and all the employees. I always thought Gloria was interested in accounting in its widest sense possible, in its interest around society, whether it's NGO accountability, whether it was about migration, whether it was about, I think there's a special issue on race, I think you're part of, and all the work that you have contributed on also accounting in emerging economies and developing economies. So it's really a treat for us to have you as the keynote speaker. So I will leave you to start off, I think about 45 minutes, and then we'll have some questions before we go out for lunch. Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here this afternoon, and also it's a real honor to have been made given the DAA last year. It was the last thing I expected ever to be made a distinguished accounting academic. So I'm really grateful to BAFA, really thankful to all of you for giving me that support. It's interesting, the first accounting conference I went to was in 1995. I think it was in Cardiff, I'm not sure. And with a group of people, we presented a quantitative paper, never again. There was somebody sitting at the back of the room, and we had a lot of grief because it was 3 of us presenting, 2 of us knew the content and what we wanted to say, and then the person who had all the numbers. And I found out that if you put up numbers, the numbers attract all sorts of questions, all sorts of queries, and never again. Okay, so after that was when I decided to do my PhD. And of course, doing a PhD at an older, more mature age, you tend to focus on the things that really interest you. So I had learned that I wasn't going to do a quantitative piece of work, but I was going to be doing something that, to me, really mattered. And it was, my PhD was in local education authorities and management control, performance management issues. And that was something that really interested me. And I'll tell you a bit about it as we go on. But the whole theme, the whole talk is really about accountability. And I think accountability is really very interesting. The world revolves around accountability, us being able to justify, to explain, to search for answers, looking at accountability. So it's really important, I think. And a lot of my work, and Steven said I've done a lot of work on migration and NGO accountability, etc. It's all revolved around accountability, especially the social aspects of accountability. And accountability, of course, does not go away. It's with us all the time. It's contemporary, but it's also historical, and it's, of course, it's changes. It's something that politicians talk about all the time, and policymakers talk about all the time, and as, of course, as academics. Its continuing importance is being recognized by APIRA. APIRA is holding a thought leadership workshop in June about accountability. Similarly, there's a special issue about accountability being edited by Giuseppe Grossi, in which he looks at the accountability and disruptions caused by digitization. So it stays with us forever. So bear with me. I hope you enjoy the talk. What I'm trying to do is to track accountability through my research and consider ways of expanding this work for more meaningful impact. So I'll say a bit about what I've done and what I think can be added to push the agenda forward. I'm using the work of, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Rached. I'm using the work of Rached 2016, which gives us an alternative framework for looking at accountability. And I'm encouraging the younger academics, the accounting scholars, and newer emerging scholars really to have a rethink about accountability, and not just to be concerned about the things that we have talked about already, but how it can be influenced in the future. I'll touch about policy things. I'll touch upon the social, touch upon environment sustainability, and then also issues of race and social inequality. I'm particularly interested in hidden accountabilities. These are the things that really I think about and worry about a lot. So, do you remember? Does anybody know who this person is? Do you recognize him? Who was he? And he's a guy who made me do my PhD. I hated his education policies. He drove me crazy. He drove me absolutely crazy. So I have a lot to be thankful to David about, because at least he set me off on a career. And it's stuck on him. It's still being difficult. Okay, so during the time when I was thinking about my PhD, there's a lot of nonsense in the newspapers about education and failing organizations. That term used to make me really angry. Failing education activities. I worked at Thames Valley University, and I know we worked hard. We received students from a variety of different places. Students who have all sorts of life issues and life problems, and we help them to gain their degree, help them to go on to become professional accountants. So the very concept of failing educational institutions, I still don't know what it means, but this was one headline, and it was talking about TVU. As one university fails, are there others to follow? I suspect they were talking about finance, also talking about educational performance. Then there was also the comment about, can I get rid of this? We will be monitoring how education authorities are doing. We already monitor progress in the lowest performing 200 schools. Underachieving secondary schools are being threatened. There was a whole sense of educationalists were being beaten with a stick about student performance. But actually, as academics and as educators, we know that we're interested in inspiring young people, inspiring them, helping them develop confidence. And it's not just about student performance. So I started my research, as I said, because I was really angry with David Plunkett, and that whole issue of failing led me to performance, then led me to performance management control, to performance management. And in a roundabout way, I got to accountability, and that's where it was really very interesting. It's all about accountability. And if you look now in the press, there's still a lot of talk about accountability in education. I saw this recently. Politicians who smashed up the education system, and I like that. I like that because a lot of politicians have smashed up the education system. You could very well say politicians smashed up the health system as well. The old LEA module is dead. But why can we not have democratically, and that's the word in question, accountable organizations? And also the issue about the word we, giving a sense that all of us should be involved in looking at accountability of organizations. I mean, of course, in the university sector, in a few weeks' time, we're going to get our ref results. We've had in July, the NSS results will come. There is talk of TEF, there is talk of KEF, all of which is society looking for accountability from educators. Of course, accountability it's as I said previously, it's contemporary, but it's also historical, and you find that it changes over time, but it never quite goes away, and it's always something that seems to be something that good that we're trying to achieve. So it's all about accountability, and I mean a lot of work has been done in the accounting by the Accounting Academy in the accounting literature about accountability. I mean, Sinclair was 1995, and she said all sorts of interesting things about the chameleon-like nature of accountability. The more we try to define it, the more murky it becomes. And she made the point about it being cherished, sought after, but yet elusive. And then you have Morgan in 2002 explaining how it's constantly changing. And then, of course, Bobbins in 2010. And I've just stopped in 2010. There's a lot of literature about accountability. But then, as the top 2 points make, it's cherished, it's something we value, and yet we struggle with it. Bobbin starts to bring in the idea of if you like, action and the person in terms of it being a virtue, as well as a mechanism. And my sense is that in accounting, we have tended to look at the mechanism and perhaps not looked enough at the other aspects of accountability, perhaps as a virtue. We are all aware of these key questions. Who is accounting to whom? Accountable for what? And on what basis of standards? How and when is accountability discharged? What are the consequences? These are the things we learn when we read about when we start moving into accountability. My suggestion is that there's several answers, and it's through looking at these different answers to these questions that we can expand. Who accounts to whom? Of course, you have the principal and the agent idea, but also we need to recognize that there are people we need to account to who are silenced. There are voices that we don't hear. There are invisible stories that we should try to unearth, which really help us make sense of accountability relationships. What standards and on what basis? Accountable for what? And of course, in accounting, a lot of times we're looking at economic impacts. But the other impacts, of course, they're societal impacts. And it's good to see that there's more focus on the environment as well. But the impacts, of course, change. Over time, we may end up looking at different things. And as I said, there is contemporary aspect, but there's also a historical aspect of accountability. How and when is accountability discharged? Of course, the usual answer is, well, we're using a variety of accounting mechanisms. My argument and others is that accounting mechanisms are not enough. There are other things that we need to be paying attention to. What about the stories that are told, and also the stories that are not told? And of course, there are consequences. Again, similarly, the visible and the invisible. So I've started to look at Ratched, to use Ratched to frame this talk. And Ratched is she's writing from legal and political ideas. And she makes this fantastic statement, I think. It's a minimalist, she's trying to give a minimalist concept of accountability, because if you keep the definition small, then you can expand it to do other things. It then enables you to provide a large analytical map that can be used for both description and critical assessment of accountability. And I'm using it, I'm using her framework in, thanks to Richard and Jane, Broadbent and Laughlin's middle range thinking approach, whereby I'm using her theory as a skeleton and then adding, embellishing, depending on things that I have done and things I think can be done further. And then the other thing that I think this paper does, which I like, is that she encourages us to move from the descriptive, because we can describe what's going on. But what I find what's interesting is what should we be doing, the normative. So she allows us to think about who should be accountable, to whom, for what, or what should we be accountable for on the basis of which standards. And of course, we want to, I'm looking for a normative look at accountability in order to encourage us to push it further ahead. She develops this framework with 8 coordinates. Okay, the ones in red are the things that I'm going to talk about. If I was to talk about each of the 8, we'll be here till dinner time. And sadly, I don't think, Stephen, you have another conference dinner for us. Okay, so I'm looking at really the formality of relationships, what she calls spatial vectors, institutionality, expertise, and then timing. Of course, I mean, what she's saying is that you can identify coordinates that, if you like, it's that give you a spread. You can look at accountability in terms of it being based on formal relationships or informal relationships. And I suggest that most of what we do in accounting is based on formal relationships. What about the informal? Then she talks about space or vectors. And here she's talking about accountability in terms of how it is provided, whether it is vertical, top down, or bottom up, or whether it is horizontal. And I suspect and I think that in accounting, again, we tend to focus on the easy, which is the top down, the vertical. Institutionality, she's suggesting that we can look at accountability as a unit or an entity, a wholesale, or as comprising of many different bits and pieces. And again, my sense is that in accounting, we're looking at the whole organization. We're not looking at the makeup of the organization. She also talks about the expertise that's underpinning and the accountability. Again, accounting, I suspect we are the technocrats. We are the ones who are the specialists who know. But what about the lay people? They also know. I was discussing with somebody who said, when you're thinking about hospitals and you're thinking about the NHS and you're listening to the managers and you're listening to the doctors, it's so important for us to listen to the patients as well. The patients are not the specialists. The patients are they're the most knowledgeable in terms of what's happening to them. Do we account by listening to what the patients are saying? And then the final one I'll talk about is timing. That is, and what Bashir is saying is we can think about accountability before the event or after the event, ex post or ex ante or ex post. We can think of it in stages, in long term or short term. So, some more pictures, going into my things I have researched and how I think we can push some of these ideas forward. I'm using the migration example to show the formal versus informal relationships. Of course, the Windrush generation came into the UK. These are people from the Caribbean or the West Indies in the 1948. They came to join to help rebuild the UK after the war. To some extent, my mother she didn't come on the Windrush, but she also came into the UK in 1958 to help with nursing. And she left us in Ghana and did her nursing training, and then after a number of years, brought us back. So I could have been one of the Windrush generation kids, because what happened, of course, was that there was at that time, there wasn't a formal relationship between the people who arrived in the UK. Most of them did not come with passports. Over time, of course, immigration rules changed. Theresa May introduced what she called the hostile environment policy for immigration, and it's called the hostile environment policy. And a lot of the things that were introduced using accounting technologies, accounting technology, accounting logic, in the sense that you couldn't open a bank account unless somebody gives you the support, unless you have a job. You can't get accommodation unless you can prove you have the correct papers. You can't get hospital appointments unless you prove you have research papers. You have the correct papers, and hospitals, landlords were going to be charged. They're going to be penalized, £10,000 or more, depending upon whether you engaged with these activities. It was meant to be hostile, meant to keep people away. Counting information was used, and the immigration rules was legalized. It was embedded in law. My question then becomes, what about the informal relationships? The time in which the hostile environment was going on, and these Windrush people were being chased and sent out. These people, a lot of them were in their 60s and in their 70s. They'd always been British. They'd always worked in the UK. There was an informal accountability relationship there that should have been considered. That was completely ignored. Of course, when I wrote the paper, I've written about 4 migration papers. This particular paper is Agyemang and Lehman and Agyemang 2020. The question came, where was the accounting? And, when you're doing some of these, I think, more interesting work, you often have to justify accounting. You have to justify accounting, and I tend to justify it in terms of the control aspects, in terms of the use of technology, in terms of the using of thinking. But of course, you might have to find yourself having to use different ways of gathering information about such accountabilities: the use of counter accounts, the use of stories, the use of narrations. So that's the informal. That's the informal that I thought about in terms of my work. But then I also think about other work. Accountability is limited by what accounting discloses. And I look at these pictures and I see these people. That's the women here are panning gold. They're panning gold in Ghana. I look at the risk associated with what they're doing, and I wonder where is the accountability to them? Where are these stories told in our accounting papers? The boys carrying the load. They're carrying cobalt. They're mining cobalt. Now, if you look at cobalt, I looked at some CSR reports for mines. What you find is you find information about the number of deaths Okay, you find information about the number of deaths. You won't find you find information about the total numbers that have been mined. There's no information. There's no accounting for what these pictures are depicting. In Ghana, a lot of the rivers are polluted. A lot of the rivers are polluted because of gold mining. Of course, there's a responsibility for the Ghana government as well, but there's a responsibility for us as people reporting on accounting. Those of us who have electric cars, when you park your electric car, remember the young boy in this is a Congo, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, who's been carrying this load, and that story is not included in the accountability that we get, even in the CSR reports. So the work we did on NGO accountability, we focused on what Ratchet calls accountability through space, the spatial, and then we found typically the upward accountability, vertical accountability that Ratchet talks about. I mean, this is the classic asymmetry of power, where the funders, of course, demand an account from the workers to explain what's going on. Our work discovered that hierarchical accountability also have unintended consequences. Because of the fear of funding, the workers told the funders and the donors exactly what they wanted to hear. They were tactical in the way they complied. They complied with the demand for accountability. The context, which was more important, was ignored. And interestingly, they demanded reciprocal accountability. So those of you working in NGO accountability, that's the next stage. That's the next stage to actually tease out what is reciprocal accountability. What does it mean, and what are the benefits or challenges associated with them? Similarly, our work on NGO accountability, we questioned, or we interviewed at the grassroots with the beneficiaries, and the same sorts of tears came. The fact that they're looking for more social, more informal approaches, and what we noticed, of course, was that even by the act of us sharing our findings with them and talking to them, gave opportunities for learning, and it was a way of driving empowerment. I think the point is that accountability is important, and it impacts on people's lives. I'm not sure you've come across this paper, and I think it's an amazing paper, something that's recommended you read if you are interested in accountability. Dillard and Vinari, Critical Dialogic Accountability. And here what they're trying to do is, what they're suggesting is that in providing, we shouldn't be led by accounting. Accountability should be seen as a subject in its own matter, and we shouldn't be led solely by accounting. But if we're looking for information about how things impact on people's lives, etc., we need to recognize, and we shouldn't be stripping out that there are conflicting needs, that there is power on the play, that there's complexity, there's a multidimensional approach, and actually we should find a way of actually developing information that allows us to recognize these challenges. So they're suggesting critical dialogical accountability, which involves speaking, and you begin to wonder how practicable it is, speaking to all stakeholders who have an interest in having debates in order to consider their information needs, in order to move away from just the accounting and what we know as accounting to find alternative ways of discussing accountability, of finding information for accountability. Horizontal accountability, I mean, Richard talks about it as peer-to-peer, you know, at the same level. And I've struggled to find examples of that where a single agent is both an accountee and an account holder. Did some work with Matthew Egan in Australia. We looked at water management in Ghana. I mean, this is the norm in a lot of places in Ghana, where you have kids going to fetch water, moving on water on their head, and bringing water into the family before going to school. So water management is something that's close to my heart as well. And the story was a story about PPPs, public-private partnerships, and how the World Bank was insisting or was driving PPPs in water management. The PPP failed. The PPP failed. So we told the story of the failure of the PPP. Then subsequently, what happened was the government of Ghana realized it was accountable not just to the World Bank, it was accountable also to the people and the needs of the people. And they put in democratic governance and public accountability, public engagement activities. So they put themselves in between the World Bank and the people, and through that they were able to ensure that there was some progress towards urban water management. I'm not sure if that is horizontal accountability. I keep on coming back to that and trying to find the rule, but I think we can find incidences where horizontal accountability may have an impact. I mean, if you think about Extinction Rebellion and the demand that governments do things to recognize the perilous situation we are in. There's research there for us. There's research that requires active engagement with activists, because I think the activists are clear that something needs to be done, but actually it should be done by all of us. I mean, I like the statement. The science is clear. It is understood that we are facing an unprecedented global emergency. We are in life. We must act now. So it's carrying out research that looks at, well, what's the we? What can we do together to manage this situation? It's also important. Accountability relationships, the whole or the individual. The whole or the individual. And a lot of times our work looks at the organizational. But of course there is organization comprises of many people, and Sinclair talked about the personal, being about managers having personal feelings of accountability as well. I mean, another paper that if you haven't read, I think is very interesting is Lu and Kaminga 2021, and they look at how accountability plays between the individual and the whole. Talking about a choir, so they're looking at the relationship between the individual singers and the orchestra, the choir and the choir master. And one interesting thing that comes out from that is that human relatedness is important. Accountability has to do with emotions and the way we think about things. And they're calling for what they call intelligent accountability. Intelligent accountability that needs to be practiced in organizations. Intelligent accountability that respects the way people work together. course, there's a picture of the man of the moment there. It's a picture of Boris there. And then you begin to wonder, is he accounting, who is he accountable to? Is he accountable for anything? Accounting for self? Or is he accounting at all to himself? Or is he using his accountability of self for the benefit of the country? Of course, if you focus just on the individual and the accountability to self, then you start becoming narcissistic, and then you also start looking for instrumental ways of achieving the accountability. Richard also talks about expertise. And saying that if we're looking at accountability, we can have variations in who has the expertise. One thing that struck me there was work we did looking at the ABS journal, and a statement that we put in there was that a lot of times we have subjected ourselves to symbolic violence because we have accepted societal regulation without accepting that actually the expertise for the relationship with research comes from us, and it's going to happen again. We're going to have the ref results in the middle of May, and again, society is going to assess our performance and what we need, what we have done and what we haven't done. And I think the point here is that accounting expertise is an expertise that can contribute, but there are other skills, the other things that we can draw upon to achieve a broader accountability. Finally, I want to talk about temporal accountability, and Shazad, I think I'm running a bit late. Sorry, not Shazad, Teven. Ratchet talks about accountability as either ex post or ex ante. Okay, so she's talking about accountability after the fact, after the event has happened, and that tends to be an accountability that's controlling. Now, should we also be thinking about an accountability that's preventative, that is going to lead to change? But when I read that, I struggled a bit with her ideas, and again, I'm trying to see where my work has maybe stretched. And we did some work about the slave trade in Denmark and the role Denmark played in the slave trade in the 18th century. Our conclusions were, and we traced the different types of accountability systems. We had somebody who read the archives, etc. That accountability systems were complicit with the crafting and narration of the slave trade. But of course, accountability changes. It's constantly changing, and what happens in the past also influences the future. And I was thinking about historical research. We can do historical accountability research for historical, just to understand the past. And the team, we had one historian and two accountants. And the view for the historian is that history in itself is important. We shouldn't try to project it forward. And we, the accountants, were saying, no, I'm only learning about the past because I want to know what does it mean for today. So of course, there's a variety. Past systems of accountability, learning about them, they have value, but also using them to help us understand present-day inequities. So you start thinking again and start thinking about the slave trade. There's a slave trade going on right now. There is the modern slavery, and using what we've learned about the past slave trade, maybe we'll be able to find things about current slave trade? What are the signs of inequity? What are the numbers? What are the signs? What's missing? What's available? What is projected? What I'm interested in? What stories? What narrations? What's missing? The silences. Again, the same idea of accountability being more than accounting. So after going through all of that, after going through Ratchet's paper, she then comes to pulling it all together to talk to us about the functions of accountability. And looking at those functions, I think in accounting, we have tended to look at the technical, building institutional capacity, looking for performance. But actually, if we stretch, if we look forward, we can also use what we learn in terms of activities, accountability activities, to enable participation, or as emancipatory, as also for defensive and strategic. So, my conclusion is accountability should be seen as a means to an end, not just as an end. So when we're interested in things like race, gender, environment, human beings, the past, the present, there is something for accountability. We should think about how we're going to be accountable for these things. How are we going to actually go about doing it? How are we going to go about collecting all this sorts of information? We should be part of the solution. Our aim should be to make the world a better place. And it's interesting that today, this morning, in the earlier session, we're being invited to engage. And I think that's the answer. The importance of engaging with a variety of people, establishing, and I've called it relational foundations, those who matter to the things that interest you. Meaningful engagement with the professional bodies, more interdisciplinary research, different methods of data collection. If you read Lowe and Kaminga, they talk about the use of videos, the use of photography, as well as interviews, and attending the choir practice sessions, etc. Because what we're doing is we need to be looking for the counter accounts. We need to be finding ways of continuously probing, and this is not something particularly new. And I think accounting scholars, we have been doing it for a while. Walker said, continuously probing the role of accounting. So let's have a look at accountability. Again, through the ages, Lowe and Paxter said, accounting systems exist within a contextual background. They only of value if they affect human behavior, suggesting let's remove the accounting and let's put accountability. Accountability systems exist in a contextual background, only of value if it affects human behavior. Move forward 15, 20 years. Again, Sachi Akomo said, accounting exists within a moral economy characterized by vulnerability and suffering. And I think some of the pictures that I've put up have shown that. And he says, accounting actors have a responsibility to act. I'm saying, let's move the accounting, let's put accountability. And the final word goes to co-author Cheryl, the importance of prioritizing human impact and morality. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening. And just a plug for our workshop and our special issue. It's a special issue of AAAJ on accounting and race and accounting defined very, very broadly. And then it to be we also hope to run a workshop in September in Cardiff. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gloria. Thank you very much. We have some time for questions. As we were going through a presentation, obviously I was waiting for a photo of Boris to appear at some point. and to just watch this whole thing in the last few months and today culminating in the news on it's just a case study. So certainly an interesting case study. Right, so I will invite questions. We've got some time. So either from online, I think I see some comments online, but perhaps to, I think it's a comment to recommend something to read about data feminism. All right. Yes. Oh, good. Okay. So thank you, Stuart.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a very interesting presentation. Thank you so much. It's quite astonishing, it's quite surprising how it seems like, though in your presentation you asked who it's not very clear, or who, for example, who am I accountable to, or who is accountable to me? Yeah, it's not being like established, but it's a bit astonishing how it is like maybe in the systems, how the people that appear or people that we seem to be accountable have kind of silent voice. Like if you go to public corporations, for example, these corporations are owned by shareholders and then controlled by management, and the shareholders being the owners. And then we believe management needs to be accountable to shareholders, right? The owners are silent. You referenced Ghana and how the government needed to be also accountable to the people, not just World Bank. You know, looking across systems and jurisdictions and practices, it's always seems that the people that others should be accountable to, they have more like a silent voice. If you also relate it to the corporate world or financial world, you have these boards or audit committees or other committees that should be in charge or to oversee financial reporting processes, and not really doing well, not giving their best, and leading to corporate failures and all of that. And I mean, going forward, what will you say from your detailed research? Do we now say, because you mentioned engagement and participation, so do we now say, if we look at those that appear that we should be accountable to, do we ensure greater participation or greater engagement to ensure that that bit of them having silent voice, more, you know, particularly make it more renowned, you know, as a conscious effort to ensure that we have greater accountability? Thank you.
Okay, I think what you're saying, you're asking, if I try to summarize it, it's a process. You're asking a process question, really. How are we going to get about, if voices are silent, how are we going to hear them? I think that's what you're saying, and that, of course, is very important, and that's where engagement comes into play. If you are particularly interested in, I don't know, the environment, climate change, being involved with activists in some way helps you to hear the alternative voice. If you're interested in audit committees and everything, getting a role on the board may help. You know, what I'm saying is that depending upon what you're interested in, you have to go the extra mile if you're interested in doing this type of research, to hear the silent voices. But there are also silent voices that you hear in the news, in what's written. I mean, the work we did on Ghana was wholly documentary analysis. Okay, we did documentary analysis. We looked at websites of activists and that sort of things. So there are processes available for you to adventurously work on. And so that's why I said let's have a relook. And the challenge is really to all of us. If you want to do this type of work, if you want to search for silent voices, it's not everybody who's interested in that. If you want to, look, there are opportunities available for you to do it. I mean, we had a talk earlier on about the IFS that's the board that the woman was told, the UK. As if you're interested in what's happening to get the IFSs developed, apply for that opportunity to join the board. That gives you a sense of what's happening. I'm not sure if I've explained it, but I think that's what the gist of your question was.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. That was very inspiring. You started the presentation referring to the work of Sinclair about the chameleon quality of accountability, and that study was establishing a dynamic nature of accountability, changing from managerial to personal, political, and other forms. What are your reflections on the work of Rachel and all these categories being dynamically changing, maybe over time or in different contexts? Would it be perhaps another manifestation of chameleon quality of accountability within these categories?
That's very interesting. Yes, it is chameleon-like. It is chameleon, and Sinclair is spot on. What I like about Rachel is the fact that she says there's a spectrum. No, so if you like, Sinclair talks about political accountability and the different forms of accountability. Rachel will be adding that it's not just at one point, there's a spectrum. So you can look at formal political accountability, but there is also informal political accountability. Sinclair talks about managerial accountability. There is, if I superpose Ratchet onto it, there is also that formal or informal. Okay, so I think it's adding more. And again, as you know, with research, you select a theory that's going to help you to explain. I mean, Ratchet is relatively new. Sinclair is a classic. It's a classic paper on accountability. But I find that the Ratchet one may be easier to operationalize. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Ron.
Gloria, thank you for a very interesting presentation. At the start of your talk, you referred to your early work looking at the school education in the UK. I believe last week that there was a survey suggesting that 44% of school teachers are planning to leave their sector in the next 5 years. Is that a sign that things are no better now than when you looked at it?
I think so, sadly. I think so. And I put the picture up of David Plunkett. I could very well have put a picture of Michael Gove as well, because it's the same sort of bashing of teachers. I mean, as educationalists, I think we know we do want our students to pass exams, definitely. But actually, we are engaging with the whole individual, inspiring students to want to learn. Okay, so it's more than exams, and that's why teachers are leaving, because in the past we thought of, I think hopefully it's still the same, that education is a vocation. Teachers are interested in doing something for society, and if the accountability for them is not towards this vocation that they're interested in, but towards making sure the student passes the exam, not everybody can take it. They leave. So I'm not surprised, and that's why there's that call for how can we get accountability still in education. We've tried over several decades, and we still haven't cracked it.
Thank you. We just nearly there. We've got a couple of questions. I'm going to read them from a member of the audience. Is there a role of faith, ethnicity, or culture on accountability? That's the first question. And who are we accounting for as a whole? I'm just reading the question as it was getting.
Yeah, I mean, by all means, there will be faith, spirituality in accountability. There are some papers out there that look at the role of faith in accountability. And then if you're looking at the individual accountability from the the personal, because you're going into psychology. So all these aspects of the human being become relevant. The second question was,
who are we accounting for as a whole?
Who are we accounting for as a whole? Depends upon who that whole is. It depends upon who that whole is. Is it the whole organization? Is it the whole person? And again, that's the beauty of accountability. We can define what it is that we're interested in doing, who it is that or what organization it is, what phenomenon it is that we want accountability for.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I think we've reached time, so just want to thank you again to Gloria. And
thank you very much. Oh, that's very nice. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
We can close the session and we can